I have seen brilliant leaders, leaders with impressive credentials
Right.
destroy trust in a single conversation. I have seen capable leaders disengage team. They've got great intentions,
Yeah.
but the reality is the impact that they create, especially under pressure, it's not aligned with the intentions they have.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
So I've just finished recording the episode with Preeti, and it was absolutely amazing. I love that we got to talk about inclusive leadership and what it looks like specifically if you're leading teams and within the corporate arena. But it still does apply to us as space holders, as coaches who have containers with which we are supporting other humans. And in particular, talking about psychological safety, talking about the kind of leader that we need to be in the times that we're living in right now. We spoke about trust, we spoke about shared power, and many, many other things that you just have to tune in to listen. But before you do, here is Preeti's bio that I must read out to you so you know who she is. Preetie Boler is a behavioral risk strategist and Amazon #1 best-selling author and creator of the Shiftcode framework. With 30 years of legal and commercial leadership experience, including high-stakes negotiations, disputes, and leadership in construction and corporate environments, Preeti discovered a truth most organizations haven't addressed. Leadership behavior under pressure is the most expensive and managed risk category in business. A certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Preeti built the Shiftcode system, a behavioral navigation tool to help leaders recognize their reactive patterns and shift them in real time, closing the gap between intention and impact. Her Amazon #1 bestseller, Shiftcode Leadership, is helping leaders across Australia build thriving teams grounded in trust, engagement, collaboration, and inspiration. Without further ado, here is Preetie Boler. Your publicist reached out to me, and I'm so happy for the connection that we made. And thank you for being here.
You're most welcome, Annie. I'm honestly looking forward to the conversation today. I'm delighted to be here.
And so our conversation today will be centered around your book, Shiftcode Leadership, which you have an incredible framework that you have put together. But before we get to the framework and the book itself, what was the catalyst for it? What made you feel, I want to write a book, and specifically around leadership in the way that you have? Because when I think of leadership, so much has been put out there, and we're not lacking in terms of information. But why specifically right now and the theme that you've picked?
Professionally, Annie, I have spent 30 years in corporate leadership. I've I started my career as a litigation lawyer and then became a construction lawyer and was in-house as a general counsel. And majority of my working life has been spent in construction and facilities management, predominantly in contractual disputes. And, handling contractual disputes, having tough conversations, and also being in stressful, high-pressured environments, I have seen brilliant leaders, leaders with impressive credentials destroy trust in a single conversation. I have seen capable leaders disengage team. They've got great intentions.
Yeah.
But the reality is the impact that they create, especially under pressure, it's not aligned with the intentions they have. All right. And I've been observing leaders for a long time, like I said, and what I also realize is it's not just leaders, also organizations. I've been in organizations with, they've got diversity, equity, and inclusion. They've got policies, they need good employee engagement, psychosocial safety. Policies are there, the strategies are there, the value statements, the code of conduct. But I didn't see the repeatable behaviors aligned to those organizational intentions as well. And this is what I call the intention impact gap.
Right.
And that is why I built the framework. That is why I built Shiftcode. It's a behavioral navigation system. And the book is called Shiftcode Leadership. So Shiftcode is the behavioral navigation system. But the book is it's to help leaders. It's a guide to building thriving teams and a thriving positive culture. Like I said, it started with a question I carried with me for a long time. And that is, why are some leaders able to build thriving teams while others are struggling?
And that is such a great observation to make first and foremost, but to want to get to the core of it and put together a guide to help solve this issue between intention and impact. Specifically, I'm thinking about my listeners who are coaches, consultants, they're space holders who would describe themselves as caring. They care deeply, they're values led, they're committed to equity. How can leaders who care deeply as they do still cause harm or reinforce exclusion without realizing it from your experience?
The gap happens. There's a reason why the gap happens. Yes, leaders, leaders become leaders. They don't intend to be bad leaders. They don't intend to disempower their teams. Most of the time, they want to be brilliant, excellent leaders. But what happens is, when under pressure, when things don't go as planned, in high-pressured environments, they default to unconscious behavior patterns. We default to reacting, to avoiding, to controlling, and sometimes even bias. And we don't realize we are behaving that way. Our intentions are good, but like I said, the experience and how you show up and how people experience you will be a completely different situation when you default to those unconscious patterns. And our brains are pattern matching machines. We will always default to what is familiar, what we've been programmed with, whether it's from childhood, life experiences, and sometimes even cultural conditioning. I'll share something personal about myself, Annie, and this is where I came from. right? I was brought up in an environment where the narrative was be quiet, speak only when spoken to, do as you're told,
Yeah.
right? And I grew up, most of my adult life was shaped by people pleasing.
Mhm.
I'm not good enough. I've got to go above and beyond. And it's even more, the weight of that emotional burden is even more when you are not fitting in, when you're from a different culture, different background, different skin color.
Mhm.
And it's even more. And where I'm coming from with this is because I've been programmed with it, I would default to it all the time.
Yeah.
And even though I know if I stop and if I'm conscious, if I'm more deliberate and intentional with my action, that's not who I want to be. That's not how I want to show up. But that's what happens when we are not intentional with our action. So coming back to leaders who they don't want to be biased, they care, they want to practice diversity and inclusion, for example.
Mhm.
They want their employees to be engaged, they want to get better results with their engagement surveys. They need to then shift from unconscious behaviors or unconscious behavior patterns, elevate their behavioral intelligence, and shift to more conscious, intentional behaviors.
Mhm.
And that's basically what the framework is all about.
And so what would that look like in practice? If you know my intention coming into this group meeting and talking about potentially something that might be difficult, but it is received differently. It lands not the way I intended it to land. Where do I begin as somebody who is a leader and I want this to have the impact that I intended it to have? Where do I begin?
You begin with the mandate of a thriving workplace. What is the mandate of a thriving workplace? It's for a leader to create an environment or environments where people feel safe,
Mhm.
where people feel seen, heard, valued, and supported. You want to create that kind of environment. So a simple example would be if you're in a team meeting, leader means well, but projects, deadlines are coming up. There's been a specific failure in the project, and there's high tension. It's a stressful situation, and the leader commands, controls, dominates the whole meeting because the leader thinks it's good to be decisive. And
Yeah.
you have one person or two putting their hand up to contribute, to share an idea, to challenge an assumption, and they are shot down. Like no one listens to them. No, their ideas are not explored, for example. And something as simple as that
Mhm.
can have an impact that the leader didn't intend.
Right.
And when someone doesn't feel safe to speak up, they go quiet.
Yes,
You're not going to find them speaking up the next time because they've been shut down before.
that's
They're
right.
not going to put their hand up again.
Mm, mm. And
So,
so when it comes, because that is, and particularly for those who come from marginalized backgrounds, it is it's such a difficult position to be in because you're weighing up, should I push and keep asking, or I've been shut down. The experience becomes so different with the leaders who are working with diverse teams and people from different backgrounds, ethnicities, even genders. How can they be more, I guess, inclusive with their leadership, with it still having the impact that they want it to have?
all right, it's about cultivating, like I said, conscious, intentional behaviors. Start practicing it right away. start being allies in a meeting. Say, for example, you've got a lady who shared an idea in a meeting, all right? And then her idea wasn't explored. Everyone was quiet. The leader was quiet when she shared the idea. 10 minutes later, a gentleman shares the same idea, the same, and he gets credit for it. And the leader suddenly says, "Oh, that's a great idea. Let's talk about that. Let's explore that. Thank you, James." Whereas Jane was the one who raised it, right? So as team members within that meeting, what you do is you make a point. What you could say is, hold on, I believe Jane shared that earlier. How about we acknowledge that first? Something like that, something simple. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture, just a simple, small step, a behavior that can bridge that gap, right? If an idea is overlooked, like I said, say, can we come back to what Jane just said? Or if a lady has been interrupted or someone has been interrupted, it doesn't have to be a lady. You could say, "I'd like to hear what Priyanka was about to say. Hey, Priyanka, would you like to finish your thoughts around that topic?" You know? And we do have the power within us. We don't need someone to give us that authority. We already have that power to actually speak up for others. We don't have to wait, right? So yeah, it's about building the courage to be comfortable speaking up.
Yeah. And courage is a muscle. It takes time to build it. Courage comes from doing it and doing it again and really building that muscle to speak up or to address something that potentially could go down in not the intended way. When we look at psychological safety in the workplace, how does that look like? And I keep coming back to diversity in terms of the teams because sometimes, especially in spaces where there is little representation, it is easy for the status quo to take over and that be what is safe for certain people. But what would, psychological safety look like for everyone within a workplace?
I would revert back to the mandate, right? Yes, you want to feel safe to speak up, safe to challenge assumptions, safe to share ideas, Annie. That is so important. And when psychological safety isn't, we're not talking about just the bullying, the sexual harassment, that it shouldn't be there, right? It absolutely, that's toxic behavior. But there's also behaviors that we keep tolerating, especially leaders who who are not, how shall I put it? Who are not aware, who are not self-aware of how they are actually showing up, who are not aware about people around them, and also not aware about the situation that they are in. Sometimes a joke or a remark in a situation that's lighthearted and it goes down well, but there will be a time and a place for that kind of statements and remarks, right? And that, if repeated, can make someone feel like, oh, I'm not comfortable here. And that's also a breach of safety. I don't feel comfortable being in this environment or being part of this conversation. Yeah. So psychosocial safety, one of the hazards, I think the code of practice does provide a whole list of hazards that we can see in the workplace. And workplace behaviors is one of the hazards of psychosocial safety. So it's basically making sure that you are being aware of how you show up and how others experience you. I think that's the key.
Mm. It's taking me back to my days in HR. So before I became an online business owner, doing the work that I do, I worked in corporate arena for for over 15 years in human resources. And one of the things that we had to do from time to time was having those difficult conversations with hiring managers in particular within their teams and making them aware of certain perhaps behaviors they may not be aware of within your sphere of work, your realm of work, behavior wise. How do you go about this, especially maybe you've been contracted to go and work for a particular organization? Is it through observation? How do you do what you do in order to see where the gap might be? And what kind of conversation then do you have from there?
The gap that I often observe is not acknowledging the other person. A lot of the time, the conversation is very directive, very instructional, but we don't take the time to acknowledge the other person. We don't take the time to value them. We don't take the time to show empathy. And that's really sad because I think it could be as simple as, say, if there's non-performance and someone is not performing and the leader needs to have a conversation with the person.
Mm.
Majority of the time, what I see is, hey, here are the areas you're not performing. I'd like to see these improvements put in place. A shift of that conversation could be, hey, let's give this person a name. Hey, Eric, I've got some concerns. I've observed that your performance has not been to the standard that we are used to. I mean, we value the work you do. We value the contributions you've made to this team. This is the acknowledging part. This is where you show them that you value their presence within the team. You value the kind of work they bring, right? And then you say to the person, and this is what you've been able to do before. Is there something that's happening that we need to know that's not helping you meet those standards? Please share with us. This is a safe space. Let's talk about it. Can you see how that's really different from the original conversation? I think, Annie, a lot of the times we forget that the other person has feelings. The other persons may have struggles that they're going through. We just assume that they're not performing and they need to be told off or they need to be put on a performance improvement plan. But if we took the time to engage with them, help them be seen, help them feel safe to share what's happening in their lives, help them be heard, right? And then show them support and value them, it changes things.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. That change of perspective in how we approach the conversation. And it leads me to one of the areas I care deeply about, which is how leaders share power rather than unconsciously protecting the hierarchy that exists because there's a hierarchy. So how does behavioral intelligence help leaders to recognize when they're holding on too tightly to control?
Oh, I love that. Okay. I think this gives me an opportunity to speak about the framework itself, the Shiftcode tool. So I call it a behavioral navigation system. I want you to think of it as a GPS, a GPS for how you show up, especially under pressure, right? The tool has got two parts. The first part is the 4 quadrants. This is the 4 behavioral states or the common behavior patterns. And what I've done is I've mapped the quadrants with nautical metaphors. so that we're not using confrontational language. Okay, so the 4 metaphors are the storm, which represents reactive patterns. Because think of the storm, you think chaos, you think conflict or miscommunication, uncertainty, all of those things, right? Then we've got the anchor. The anchor represents avoidant patterns. The anchor represents being stuck,
Right.
no progress, no growth, procrastinating. So the avoidant patterns. And then you've got, that's the below the line quadrants, and above the line, the upper quadrants is the sails and the lighthouse. The sail is adaptive patterns. The sails is about being curious, about learning, about adapting, being agile, embracing change. And then, of course, the lighthouse is where it's influential patterns. The lighthouse is about calm, clarity, vision, and purpose. So when we default to unconscious behavior patterns, especially when we are under pressure, or leaders are under pressure, we default to the below the line quadrants, which is the anchor, the avoidant patterns, or the reactive patterns, right? But what we want to do is we want to shift to the upper quadrants. And that's where the second framework comes in. The second framework is called the Shiftcode Compass.
Okay.
The compass has 4 codes. What are the 4 codes? It's awareness, it's resilience, emotional resilience, that is, authenticity, and intentionality. So when you activate the 4 codes within you, and you activate it by a pause. When you're triggered, say a leader's been triggered and they are agitated, they're frustrated, they're angry, and they're about to lash out. Take a deep breath, pause, and activate the 4 codes of the Shiftcode Compass. The awareness will help you to see your behaviors and understand the impact it's going to have on those around you and of the situation. And then what you want to do is, through resilience, you want to regulate your emotions. It's about emotional regulation. It's about you acknowledging, I am feeling agitated right now. So you notice what you're feeling. And when you name it, you tame it, right? So when you say, I notice, you're not identifying with it. You're not saying, I am angry. You say, I notice I am feeling angry. And then what you want to do is reframe your perspective. Understand why you're feeling that way. You could be feeling that way because that project really matters to you. Hitting those deadlines was really, really important for the client. And then shift your perspective. Now, how can I help the team? Or what behavior do I need to have to help the team to work through this situation? Simple as that. And then authenticity, it's about how are my behaviors aligned to my values? How are my behaviors aligned to the values of this business? How are my behaviors aligned to the outcomes I want to achieve? You want them to match. So any action you take needs to match those values. And finally, intentionality is about those deliberate actions that you're going to take. The tool seems really simple, but the idea is for it to be practical. And it works because what it does is it addresses what you do, not just what you know, right? It's not about walking into a meeting saying to yourself, I know I need to be positive and productive. My actions need to be productive in this meeting because we need to get those outcomes. We need the team to rework this or whatever the situation is, right? But just knowing what to do instead of the doing itself, it doesn't cut it. It will not bridge the gap. What you want to do is make sure that your deliberate action, you regulating your emotions, becoming aware, regulating your emotions, and taking those deliberate actions, that's what's going to help you bridge the gap between your intention and your impact.
And one of the things that I have found for many leaders, at least the ones that I work with, is that accountability can feel pretty confronting because it brings up a lot of things. It brings up shame, defensiveness, fear of getting it wrong. What does real accountability look like in inclusive leadership?
You see, most of the time, if someone has fear of speaking up, fear of making mistakes, first thing they're going to do is blame, shift blame. So if leaders in organizations want more accountability, then it's absolutely important that they ensure that their team members they feel safe to share that they've made an error and a mistake. I'm going to take you into a moment. This will demonstrate to you the different kind of behaviors within a leader. All right. So let's say you're sitting in a meeting and it's been a tough week. It's been a stressful week. Deadlines are slipping and the pressure's rising. One of your team members speaks up and says, "We can't do this. We are making mistakes. We are overloaded. This is not working for us." The leader leans forward and says, "That sounds like an excuse to me. Everyone else is coping." What's going to happen? The team stops speaking up. They stop caring as much. They just do as they're told and nothing more. Right? And right at that moment, what happens is trust collapses. Honesty disappears and engagement is no longer there. The same scenario, the same meeting, the same moment. But let's replay it, okay? Let's replay the same meeting. So the same meeting, the same brave person speaks up, and this time the leader says, "Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Help me understand what's not working. Tell me what support you need from me." And here, the team member felt heard. They felt the leader cared, and they were inspired to go above and beyond. Can you see the difference in the behavior?
Absolutely.
And that is how it is in moments like this that we shape culture. Culture is not shaped by strategy documents or posters on the walls. It is in micro moments like this that determines whether you have an inspired team, whether there is trust, engagement, collaboration. I call them the 4 pillars of a thriving organization: trust, engagement, collaboration, and inspiration. Are your teams inspired when they walk through the door every day? Are they inspired to go above and beyond?
I love that you've given those 2 scenarios. It makes it really, really clear. Going back to scenario 1, where trust has been broken, how can one go about repairing trust? What does repairing trust look like?
That's a really good question, and I love that. So let's say that leader in that scenario walks out of that meeting and realizes what had happened, okay? Calls everyone back into the meeting, and the leader acknowledges that they made an error. The leader is seen to be human, right? and not the commanding, controlling, authoritative person, but this is basically human centered leadership, where you are, as a leader, able to admit to your teams that you've made a mistake. And that is how we can rebuild trust, by being vulnerable, by being honest, and having that transparent conversation with the team and say, look here, I think I've made a not I think, but I've made a mistake. This is what I should have said instead. Unfortunately, and that's not acceptable. And call me out the next time I do that again. So what you're doing is you're giving the team permission to give you feedback.
Yeah.
And that's so important to build trust.
Yeah, I think humanizing the whole process, because sometimes we tend to look at leaders as not quite being human, like they don't make mistakes or what they say goes. But I think humanizing the process of being human makes people feel like they can relate to you, and it helps you build that trust, particularly if you say, yeah, call me out. If you see me going against my values or what I've said I should do,
Exactly.
call me out on that. And that just gives people a little bit more security. They feel safer to show
That's right.
things go out of what is expected, then they can bring that up.
And the old leadership playbook, it's no longer has a place in this modern workplaces that we have today. The old leadership playbook is no longer relevant. The command, control, hierarchy, authority, position, titles, it's no longer what team members and employees want to see. And look, the whole landscape of the workplace has changed. The modern workplace now has 5 generations, right? And each has different needs, different expectations. And by the way, I think by year 2030, it's tipping where majority will be the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys who are going to be taking over, right? The baby boomers and the Gen Xs will be retiring. And then we've got remote and hybrid work arrangements. Trust is a key element within that kind of arrangements. We need trust. And then there's mental health issues. It's on the rise. Yeah. If you look at the workers' compensation claims at the moment, mental health issues are way higher than physical injury in workers' compensation claims. And then there's, of course, psychosocial safety, as we mentioned earlier. It's no longer an option. It's a legal requirement. It's mandatory, right? With huge fines if you don't comply. And then, of course, the 5th item is AI disruption.
That's right.
AI is doing all the technical work. They are doing the analyses, the spreadsheets, the reports, the compliance. What is left for our leaders to do now is more than ever, organizations need to be increasing leadership capabilities around human-centered leadership. And the essence of human-centered leadership is the 5 mandates I spoke about. Do your people feel safe? Do they feel seen, heard, valued, and supported?
That is you brought up so many things, really, and in particular, the mental health aspect. Right now, being a leader in the times that we're living in is quite shaky, because there's so much that's happening, and just thinking about that emotional toll for a leader. How does one take care of themselves? So we've spoken about the other side of the coin where if you're not, the intention and impact gap that exists and how you can potentially try and reduce that. But what about from the other side of it, you're the leader and you have a lot that you're dealing with, particularly from an emotional perspective. What would be your advice or your suggestion for somebody who's just feeling the weight of it enormously?
So I understand the question, Annie. So what you're saying is if you as a leader and you have to juggle ensuring that your team members feel safe and their mental health or well-being is taken care of. Is that what you're saying?
Actually, for the leader, themselves, the weight that you're carrying, everything that you're having to do, but taking care of yourself personally. Because
Yes.
there's a lot that you're juggling everything and there's a lot that's been asked of you. So, and with what you've just said about mental health, being through the roof, how do leaders take care of themselves?
Yes. Yeah. Look, I've heard of leaders having burnout. Like I've been there too. Right. And because I think I can speak from my experience around burnout is I became aware that I had an issue about having the need to be perfect, redoing the work, wanting it to be the best. But that's because, and it's also because the situation I was in, like, being a woman, I found that I had more to prove.
Yeah.
Like I was more hyper vigilant about what I am producing so that it is accepted. So that led me to a point where I wouldn't delegate. I would take on everything. And I'm not just talking about delegating tasks, but delegating accountability. I would take it all on because I didn't trust my teams to produce at the level that I wanted to produce.
Right.
And I learned the hard way. What happens is you have a complete breakdown and you burn out.
Yeah.
You burn out, and a lot of leaders are doing that. So what is important is to check where you're coming from. What are your default patterns? Start there. Start becoming aware. So start using the tool. Now, the tool that I share, the Shiftcode Compass, is not just for your teams, it's also for yourself at a personal level. Okay. So, what you want to do is become aware of what are your default behaviors. Are you having the need to be perfect in everything? Do you fear that you're not going to be accepted or your reports are not going to be accepted and therefore you are going above and beyond that you need to? But also being able to open and have those honest, transparent conversations, say with your own leader,
Mhm.
and setting expectations at a reasonable level. What is expected of you as a leader? Understand that. And then having a plan around what can you delegate, what accountability, not just a task, but how can you delegate projects, for example, and learn how to set the expectations around that with your team members. That way, you're not taking everything on
Right.
yourself. And that's the awareness. Then you move on to regulating your emotions. Yes, frustrations will set in. Yes, you will get agitated and angry and upset with your team members if they're not producing the kind of work you're expecting them to produce. What you want to do is observe and notice where your emotions are. And the best way to do it is to breathe, to pause so that you become the observer. When you pause, you create a space. When you create the space to observe yourself. I don't know if have you read this book, Annie, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
No.
Viktor Frankl said, It's a great book. Viktor Frankl is a survivor of the Holocaust, and he said you can be in the worst situation, and it's a matter of life and death. All right, but practice the pause, because in the pause, right, what happens is there is a space, and in that space, you are able to observe yourself. You are able to acknowledge how you're feeling. And then what you want to do is, in that space, you are able to, instead of reacting, you respond. The space allows you to observe your behaviors, observe your default patterns, also observe what emotions are coming up for you, and then realize that, all right, I need to take a break, or I need to walk away from this. I need to go for a walk. I need some self-care, some self-compassion. We don't give ourselves enough self-compassion sometimes, right? And then take the deliberate action. Be intentional. What do I need to do now so that I am caring for myself? And caring for yourself doesn't necessarily mean going to the spa or things like that, but it's more about taking time for yourself, whether it is having a cup of tea in that one moment, that small micro moment, or taking deep breaths, maybe going for a walk, something as simple as that, just so that you can break that, so that you can regulate your emotions and break that downward spiral. Because, within the emotional scale, you can either go down the spiral or you go up the spiral. So if that's what you want to do, you want to regulate your emotion. That's the most important thing.
And before we started recording, we were talking about nature and the importance of being out in nature more. And I feel like given the times we're living in and just how much we rely on machines, we just need to be able to, unplug and just spend time away from devices. And nature has never been more healing in this time that we're living in. And as we bring this to a close, winding up now, I want to ask a couple of last questions. And this one in particular is a really important one. What kind of leader do you believe this moment in the world is asking us to become, especially if we're really serious about what we've been talking about, trust, inclusion, and shared power, because we've seen how when certain people have power, what that does to those who don't. So, what kind of leader do you believe this moment in the world is asking of us?
I think all leaders first need to recognize what are the core pillars for a thriving team. Then ask themselves, how am I going to create an environment that's going to be a foundation for these pillars for my teams to thrive? I constantly, I have done a lot of research, and I keep reverting back to these 4 pillars. And I feel that they are the most important. And if leaders can create these an environment where these 4 pillars are built instead of eroding them, then this is what I always say, then you're practicing leadership excellence. Leadership excellence to me is if a leader through their behaviors can build trust, through their behaviors can improve and foster engagement, and trust and engagement is not just with employees. I think also with external stakeholders, with your clients, with your suppliers, your vendors. Then collaboration. Collaboration enables individuals, people, whether it's your internal team members or your external team members, to feel like this is a partnership. There is a common goal, a common vision, and it gives people an opportunity to share. It gives people an opportunity for shared language as well. And also, collaboration is the key to resolving conflict. Collaboration is the key to moving away from the blame culture. Collaboration is important. And finally, inspiration. If your team's not inspired, if your clients are not inspired to work with you, then you don't have a business, right? You're no longer a leader as far as I see it. So what you want to do is, as a leader, you want to have deliberate, conscious, intentional behaviors that's going to build these 4 things. And finally, these 4 things will be supported by the mandate that I speak about, those 5 things. If you as a leader can help your teams feel safe, be seen, heard, valued, and supported. I know I keep reverting to that, but that is the key.
Yeah.
You can allow your team members to feel that, because that's what people remember, right? If I asked you, think of the best workplaces you've ever worked in throughout your career, are you going to tell me, I remember the strategies, I remember the systems they had, I remember the salary I got? No, right? What you're going to remember is how you felt in those environments, right?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
And Maya Angelou said that really, really well. People never forget how you make them feel.
Oh, yes. They may forget what you said, but
Yes,
how it made you feel, that stays with you.
that's right.
Oh, I love that. And that is a beautiful place for us to close our conversation today. One last question that I ask all my guests, and that question is, if fear wasn't a factor, how do you think you might show up more in your work?
There was a time fear was a factor, and I would edit myself in the rooms I was in. And I think every woman feels that way, or in fact, every woman of color in leadership knows what I mean by that. The constant calibration of how much of yourself it's safe to bring. How do I need to direct myself? How visible can I be? How much of my perspective, my fire can I show? Because I've been in a situation where one person is seen to be assertive and another is seen to be aggressive. Like, look, today, now, I'm not saying the fear isn't there. The fear is still there. I think it's pretty natural for us to feel fear, but I acknowledge it. I name it. And what I've learned to do is I have learned to hold fear in one hand and courage in the other hand and take the action anyway. As long as my deliberate actions match my intentions and my actions serve the outcomes I want to achieve, serves me and the people around me, take the action. But like I said, fear by your side and courage with you, both jointly.
Oh, I love that so much. That is just so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, where can people connect with you? Where is the best place they can connect with?
Right. The best place is to find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
All right. And shall I send you all my links, Annie?
All the links will be in the show notes. So the
Okay.
links to get the book, the
Yes, that's
Shiftcode Leadership, and where they can connect with you. LinkedIn is the best place. The link will be in the show notes.
excellent. So yes, start with the book, connect with me on LinkedIn, and my website is called empoweredbydesign.com.au.
Yep, it's right there. If you can see it in her
Right.
profile, if you're watching the YouTube video, that you can see all those details. But the link
That's
is in the
right.
show notes. And Preeti, thank you so much for your time today and everything that you've shared. Leadership is something that clearly is something that you're really passionate about. And I look forward to our listeners listening in and purchasing your book and getting more out of what you had to share with us today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented.